because the West didn't really respect the seventh council, and they're still trying to basically both problems stem from the same thing, and you can trace it back to Theological Photonians.
Well, it would be very hard to reconcile accepting the Seventh Ecumenical Council given the political position that you're trying to set up. I mean, how are you going to accept the Seventh Ecumenical Council when it says that the Orthodox emperor in Byzantium is the God-ordained emperor, and you're trying to set up a separate empire? So how are you going to, I mean, obviously the political machinations are the reasons why. They don't care about the theology. That's why they don't want to accept it. And so if they did accept it, then they would presumably also have to accept the legitimacy of the Orthodox imperium.
Correct. Exactly.
So yeah, so the theology is a tool here for the justification of the geopolitical moves that are being made. So here's where we get the declaration Holy Roman Empire. This is where it begins to be viewed as its own thing, where, oh, I'm the emperor of the West, by the way. And you get the reversal on the creed. Let's not forget that there's a reversal here. It's like, oh, no, we shouldn't have the Filioque. Oh, wait, but yes, actually we should. It's good. As we said, the papacy gets caught in the middle. Let's see, there's one. Oh, this is what I wanted to note about Szyszynski was that exactly, I didn't expect him actually to comment on this. I wouldn't have thought he would be as keyed into this, and maybe he wasn't aware of the Frankish thesis, but he seems to have just basically vindicated. He says, yes, this is clearly an innovation. It's clearly something that had political motivations. It's clearly a new faith that you need to evangelize for. And he says, he uses the phrase that it was a declaration of independence from Byzantium. So if you're going to accept these previous ecumenical councils as expressions of the Orthodox faith of the ecumene, and everybody admits the Seventh Synod is a valid synod, except for Calvin, then how are we going to justify all this? It doesn't make any sense, right? So we get not only a new faith, you get a new emperor, a new faith, new emperor, right? They go together, and Szyszynski vindicates this in his Filioque book. So what that means, by the way, is that this is not merely a crazy theory of Romanides, right? It has nothing to do with Romanides. Romanides can be right or wrong on an issue, irrespective of the rest of his theology. On this issue, he's correct. Doesn't mean he's right about everything, right? Again, Szyszynski has no interest in vindicating Romanides, but the book is making that point that, yes, this is clearly politically motivated and a divergence from the apostolic faith prior to it. And trads should understand this. Trads should grasp this. You want to be traditional? You should be Orthodox. Because as Snek said, it's the Carolinians that are the innovators here. They're subverting the Pope. Don't you see?
Yeah, clearly the Carolinians didn't get the memo on papal supremacy.
Oh, papal supremacy, right? Exactly.
Yeah, apparently not.
But my base, Charlemagne, my base, Charlemagne.
Yeah, killing Saxons and stuff. Yeah, but really, you know, what we call the Frankish thesis at this point, the revisionists are not really in all ranks. The only people who really start to think there's a continuity between, you know, from Peter to Augustine to Charlemagne to whatever the papacy is today, is a trad. They are the one being the revisionists. So we talked we talked about this. So first of all clergy accepts it, and the academic consensus goes this way too. So we actually talked to Professor Alibert, who is a PhD in the Catholic Institute of Paris, and who wrote a thesis on the Liber Carolini.
Oh, wow.
And he said that, so we had someone from All-Server talk to him, and he explained that in his original thesis, he started to talk about real legitimate theological controversies about iconoclasm and stuff. But he said that he revised his position, that clearly the main factor here is not truth or faith or conserving the church from the Franks. It's political.
Yes,
clearly.
Exactly. And Szyszynski backs that up, who is not writing a book to defend the Filioque. He's writing a book to academically just simply look at the debate from both sides the whole time. Also worth mentioning here, something I had forgotten in reviewing my old notes. This is where, quote, Christendom first begins to be mentioned. It's a Carolinian invention. And one thing that they did that James Kelly mentions is that they would take liturgical books that the East used and they would change them and doctor them. And so like you get for the coronation of people in the West, you start to get these new phrases about the emperor is now the ruler of all of the Holy Roman Empire, which is Christendom. And you get, for example, in Charles V, the coronation ceremony, which speaks of him in a Nestorian way, very interesting, because this will tie into Nestorian, the heart burial and heart worship, Sacred Heart issue. You get the idea that the ruler is free from all sin, as are his noble court. This is used, apparently, in the coronation ceremony. I don't know if you've heard of Kantorowicz and the two bodies of the king, but that's where this plays into this, because there's this weird development that happens at this time period where there's two notions of the body of Christ. There's the body that is the sort of the liturgical church body, and then there's this body that's this other body that's like the king and his court and this kind of stuff. So this idea will actually be present here with, I think, the Franks. And even the papacy also. The papacy will also kind of have this notion, because they're going to develop a notion of the magisterial body, which is different from the mystical body. And if you want a short introduction to that, actually Sherrard has a good summation of this analysis in Church, Papacy, and Schism. He has a whole chapter on the development of the two bodies within the magisterium of the church in the Latin view. This is Nestorian. I'm sorry, but there's one mystical body. There's not a juridical magisterial body that's of a higher ontological status than the mystical body of the layman, right, and the priests. But if you have the papal mindset, you can start to see why you would get this magisterial body that is separate and unique, separate from the mystical sacramental body of the church. Again, Nestorian presuppositions that are pretty consistent here, because if you have the correct Christology, you're going to have the correct ecclesiology. But what we're starting to see is a divergence, not just in the Frankish theology of the Imperium and icons, but there's also going to begin to be divergences Christologically here, which a lot of people miss. And that's, I think, what Kantorowicz is trying to hone in on in his famous book, The Two Bodies of the King.
Yeah, and of course, everything's linked. You know, if you introduce a Filioque, it's going to introduce Christological problems, it's going to introduce Trinitarian problems, it's going to create other stuff. And yes, this idea of, you know, the duality being introduced to the body of Christ, of course, is Nestorian, and it's still being used to this day to justify many things. You know, the Pope can be worshipping Pachamama by day, but he can still be infallible if he, you know, if he fills some specific conditions. So he can be a total formal heretic, and then at the same time he can be, you know, real Pope. You know, formal Pope, real Pope, the two natures of the Pope.
Yes, exactly. The same mistake is present here, where we can separate the actual occupant of the office from the office, right? And this allows for all manner of sophistry with, well, I'm a setter probationis, where he is a valid pope, but the charism of Peter is withheld because of his heresies, and so I can reject everything he says, even though he's still the pope. I mean, and all the infinite variations, right? From that all the way over to the Novus Ordo. Well, I accept, but I reject everything that Francis teaches, but I accept him as a pope, right? So I'm going to separate him as the representative of Christ, the body, but the head of the church, but not his teaching, right? So you can make all these separations, and there's no notion of the sacramental and clerical unity in the church, right? What does Irenaeus say, right? What does St. Ignatius say? Where the bishop is, there's the church. There's no higher magisterial strata of super bishops in Rome.
Yeah, and this idea, you know, oh, people need to be impeccable. The Pope can be, you know, a total sinner. He doesn't need to be impeccable. He doesn't need to strive for this. Paul, you know, in Timothy sets a lot of rules for the bishop. The bishop needs to be decent enough to be acclaimed by the people. That's why we have the axios access thing. So yeah, moving on. Franks. So you have this moment in history where Rome is starting to being subverted by the Frankish Church, and this is during that's where the Photian crisis happens. So first of all,
in my notes I have, let's see, there's a certain point when they start putting cousins into the office of the papacy. We might not be there yet. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. You have popes that start to promote the Filioque and fight against the Byzantines. So you have, for example, Nicholas I, who was really opposed to Photius and makes the first Photian synod, anti-Photian synod. For example, it's 869.
Okay.
That anathematizes Photius, which is, so for the Roman Catholic, it's the eighth council, basically.
Okay.
And then you have popes coming back, from the Byzantine faction, who will actually say, no, Photius is right, and the Photian synod of 879 is actually the ecumenical council. It's accepted. The council of Nicholas avoid. That's what you can see at the declaration of Photius. That's what Vonik talks about, and you see this fight inside Rome. So Rome starts to be eaten from the inside, and that's a big problem. And that's during the Photian synod. That's why 10 years apart you have two decisions regarding the creed, regarding faith, that should be infallible. That contradict one another from the Pope. At the same time, when you have problems regarding how to evangelize, how do we evangelize, for example, Bulgaria? Bulgaria recently converted. Yeah. Who should evangelize it? The Franks? Or tomorrow in the old calendar, we're going to celebrate St. Cyril and Methodius, or the Byzantine. So the Byzantine are sending people from Thessaloniki to evangelize. And there's this scare.
No, I thought John Chrysostom converted the Bulgarians.
We're going to talk about this when
I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So Cyril and Methodius are being sent to evangelize these people. And I don't remember which pope, but there's a pope that says that it's a good thing that Byzantium actually does this work, because they're afraid that the Filioque would propagate to Bulgaria. So, and there are many clashes with the Frankish evangelizers.
And remember, this is vindicated in the letters of Photius, which are not in English. The only place that I've seen this is if you look in the Dragas article that I have linked below. He has translations that some of the professors in Greece have done of the letters of Photius, where he bitches about the Franks evangelizing amongst the already Orthodox Bulgarians for the Filioque. Yeah,
exactly. And Cyril at some point is captured by the Franks. So Saint Cyril, who is a Catholic saint as well, Saint Cyril and Methodius. I think the Pope said that they're the saints of Europe.
Right.
Your church, the Frankish church that you are defending now, attacked them for evangelizing Europe. So yeah, that's another great thing. And then they will tell you that we can't evangelize.
And also another dumb low IQ response to this is that some people will say, oh, that's not talking about Charlemagne. That's talking about the term Franks was used by everybody in the West. No, it's specifically talking about the Carolingian dynasty. Read the Dragas article. It makes it very clear. He's not talking about all the West.
Exactly. So you have one more controversy of the Filioque. One is the first Filioque. There was a Filioque crisis in the West, and then it's starting to clash with the East. So you have this new church developing and subverting Rome. The Franks are doing this. They are placing cousins. They are playing politics in Rome, and Rome already has been pushed into this role of politics by Pepin, by being the papal states, by making the Pope a king. So they're caught in the middle of this, and that's during the whole crisis. And yes, Franks, it means specifically the Carolingian, not all of the Latin.
Right.
Photius talks about it. This is not a conspiracy.
Exactly, and so by the 11th century, it looks like the takeover of the papal throne is pretty much complete. We've got cousins of the Carolingians being stuck in there, just like later on the Borgias will have, their family as the Pope. But at this point, it's the Franks are controlling, and this is where presumably we start to get Avignon captivity.
It's a bit later,
Okay.
but it's a bit more complicated.
So they've already got the while the papacy's still in Rome, they've already gotten control of it. Is that right? I mean, yeah. So the throne of Peter is still in Italy, and they have control of it by the 11th century. Would you agree with that analysis?
Yeah. So the Holy Roman Empire gets formed by Otto I, and then a subsequent German emperor. During his coronation ceremony, which happened in Rome, during the coronation ceremony, he makes the Filioque being sung in Rome for the first time. So that's
okay.
That's 1014, if I remember properly. And of course, the Pope was removed. There was this tradition of the German kings, new German emperor, moving to Italy, making a military campaign in Italy, sacking some Italian cities. And then getting crowned in Rome, and removing the previous pope, putting a friendly one, and getting themselves crowned, and then you have that's where the Great Schism starts to kick in. So after 1014, the creed is instated in Rome, despite what Pope John VIII.
Yes, this is where we get to the controversy over how to say it right.
That's a Great Schism that's happening right after this, and
right.
And of course, all of this was propped up by forgeries, and the Great Schism is something that happened because of forgeries as well. The false decretals, donation of Constantine, all these false works of the fathers that we're going to see popping up again. All of this is propped up by forgeries that were made primarily by the Franks. So now, the tools that were used by the Franks to martyr Rome, Orthodox Rome, they are being used against the Byzantines by Rome. And that's what we need to understand, that Rome was the first martyr of this church as Orthodox. We do not hate Rome. We do not even hate the Franks, because the Merovingians were fine. But we need to understand that where the problem comes from. And that's why you have the Great Schism. And again, the Great Schism happened for 3 reasons. One, because we used leavened bread. Second, because we had married priesthood. And third, because we supposedly removed the creed, removed the Filioque from the creed. All of this today, they are either accepted by the Pope or historically false. Today, the papacy accepts married clergy, they accept leavened bread, and they recognize that the creed wasn't altered by the Greeks. So the 3 reasons for schism were wrong, and it was done under one authority. It wasn't done under Matthew 16:18 Dyer. It was done under the authority of the donation of Constantine. So it was done for 3 wrong reasons from a wrong authority, in contradiction to previous popes. You are, like Roman Catholics, you are not on the good side of the schism here, given the reasons you bring up. So that's a Great Schism, and that's where Rome is completely cut off from the West. So in the West now you have 2 major players. You have the Emperor and the Pope, and what's happening very quick, and that's called the episode of Canossa, is that the Emperor still wants to control the papacy. But the Pope excommunicates the Emperor. It was Henry IV, Emperor Heinrich IV. So the Pope excommunicates the Emperor, threatens a civil war, and humiliates the Emperor, and starts to prop himself as the one who decides who needs to be the Emperor. So now that it's just a battle royale between the Frankish kingdoms, the Holy Roman Empire, and subverted Rome, they're fighting one another. And that's where you have all this idea of the papacy fighting against the monarchs, being above the monarchs, fighting against Caesaropapism.
Papalo-Caesarism is what. So they always fuss about Caesaropapism, but now we're getting the Papalo-Caesarism.
And they fight against this, but the Filioque is the quintessential Caesaropapist dogma. And even with the extended
this is because the state is who really pushed this to be added, right?
Yeah. So now you have them fighting over this. You have them trying to defend this, and of course the emperor is humiliated. He needs to be half naked in the snow, and that's where you have the papacy trying to reform itself, so against the Byzantines and against the Germans, and that's where you have the introduction of cardinals. That's where you have the post-schism papal freakout, where they move away from patristics to justify the system, and they go into scholastics.
Yes,
that's what we continue.
There we go. Good point.
Yeah.
Right. So we wouldn't even have the scholastic manifestation as it happened in the West if there wasn't this prior attempt to divorce from the Byzantine heritage.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. Right now, theological arguments are not based on traditions. They're not based on the fathers. They're based mainly on forgeries. If anything, patristics still reside in the West, but they are made based on philosophical argument, and you can justify anything with philosophical argument.
Yeah, this is why when you're interacting with the trads that you're arguing with, most of the time, 99% of the time, they don't know anything about the first millennium, right? They're always just rehashing stuff from, Anselm, Aquinas, second millennium people. They're not proficient when it comes to the first millennium, and